Bishop Herman Murray is a name that resonates deeply with many people across the faith community. For years he has been recognized as a powerful voice in the church, a spiritual leader whose sermons, teachings, and presence have left a lasting impact on countless lives. To many he represents strength, conviction, discipline, and unwavering devotion. His influence stretches far beyond the pulpit, touching families, ministries, and individuals who have looked to him for guidance during some of the most difficult moments of their lives. But as is often the case with public figures, especially those who carry significant spiritual authority, there has always been a certain level of curiosity surrounding the man behind the message. The public sees the polished sermons, the strong leadership, and the image of certainty. Yet many people have long wondered what lies beneath that public image. Is there more to the story than what has been presented over the years? Is there a side of Bishop Herman Murray that the public has never fully understood? And after all this time, are we finally beginning to see the full picture? For years, whispers have circulated in certain circles. Some have described it as a lingering mystery. Others have framed it as unanswered questions that have never fully gone away. There have been moments when people felt that something about his story remained incomplete, something unresolved, something carefully protected, or perhaps something deeply personal that never made its way into the public conversation. Whether these suspicions are grounded in fact or fueled by speculation, one thing is certain: the mystery has remained alive in the minds of many. That is what makes this conversation so compelling. It is not simply about one individual. It is about what happens when a person becomes larger than life in the eyes of a community. It is about how spiritual leadership can create an image of certainty and strength that leaves little room for vulnerability. It is about the tension between public admiration and private reality. And most importantly, it is about the difficult questions that arise when people begin to wonder whether they ever truly knew the person they trusted. Bishop Herman Murray's journey has often been described as remarkable. His rise within the church has been viewed by supporters as the result of faith, discipline, calling, and dedication. His voice, his message, and his leadership style have made him stand out in a crowded religious landscape. To many, he is not just a pastor or bishop. He is a symbol. He is a spiritual authority. He is someone whose life appears to confirm the very message he preaches. But with that kind of influence comes scrutiny. Whenever someone reaches a certain level of visibility, especially in religious spaces, questions naturally follow. People begin to examine not just what is said in public, but what may have been left unsaid. They begin to look more closely at timelines, relationships, decisions, and moments that once seemed ordinary but now feel more significant in hindsight. They revisit old interviews, old stories, old impressions, and old assumptions. They wonder whether the public narrative was ever complete. And in the case of Bishop Herman Murray, some believe there are still pieces of the puzzle missing. There have been hints, suggestions, and conversations that have quietly persisted for years. Some point to his personal life, believing that certain chapters may have been intentionally kept private. Others focus on his rapid rise and the structure of power within church leadership, asking whether there were behind-the-scenes dynamics that the public never fully saw. Still others believe the mystery may not involve scandal at all, but rather a personal struggle, something human, something painful, something that may have shaped him more deeply than anyone realized. That possibility changes everything, because sometimes the biggest secret isn't a dramatic scandal. Sometimes it's a burden, sometimes it's a hidden battle, sometimes it's a chapter of pain, loss, fear, regret, or sacrifice that never got discussed because the person carrying it felt they couldn't afford to show weakness. In religious leadership especially, there is often immense pressure to appear spiritually strong at all times. There is little room for uncertainty, little room for visible struggle, and often even less room for personal transparency. So when people talk about Bishop Herman Murray's biggest secret, the real question may not be whether there is some shocking revelation waiting to explode. The real question may be this: what truths about leadership, humanity, and faith have been hidden beneath the surface all along? What makes the speculation even more intense is the way stories like this often begin. It is rarely one giant revelation all at once. More often, it starts with something small: a passing comment, a resurfaced clip, an old document, a statement from someone who claims to know more than they once shared. A detail that seemed insignificant years ago but now takes on new meaning. One little moment leads to another. People connect dots. They revisit assumptions. And slowly a narrative begins to form. That appears to be what has happened here. There is no shortage of people willing to speculate when it comes to well-known church leaders. Social media has only intensified that reality. A single post can reignite years of old questions. A single interview can reopen conversations many thought had long been buried. A single clip can spread across platforms and become the spark for countless theories, reactions, and debates. And once the public becomes emotionally invested in a mystery, every detail starts to feel important. That is why it is so important to approach a topic like this carefully. It is easy to let curiosity turn into certainty. It is easy to let suspicion become accusation. It is easy to treat rumors like evidence simply because they are repeated often enough. But when we are talking about a real person, especially someone with a family, a congregation, and a long public legacy, we have to be responsible. We can ask questions. We can examine patterns. We can discuss the public image versus the private reality, but we must resist the temptation to declare guilt or scandal without verified facts. Still, the fascination remains. Why? Because Bishop Herman Murray represents something bigger than himself. He represents the idea of spiritual authority. He represents the trust people place in leaders who speak on behalf of faith, morality, and divine calling. He represents the expectations placed on men and women who stand before others as examples. When questions arise around someone in that position, people don't just react to the individual, they react to what that individual symbolizes. That is why revelations involving religious leaders often hit so hard. If a celebrity disappoints us, it can feel frustrating. If a politician disappoints us, it can feel predictable. But when a spiritual leader becomes the center of unanswered questions, it can feel deeply personal. It can shake people's confidence. It can force them to reevaluate not just a person, but an institution, a message, or even a part of their own faith journey. And that may be why so many people are watching this story so closely. At this stage in life, with decades of ministry behind him and a legacy that is already firmly established, any new questions about Bishop Herman Murray take on even greater significance. There is something about reaching a certain age and stage that causes the public to reflect differently. People begin asking bigger questions. What was the true cost of success? What sacrifices were made? What was hidden to preserve the image? What parts of the story were never told? What truths were buried under responsibility, reputation, and the pressure to keep moving forward? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. Because the truth about leadership is that public strength does not erase private struggle. Spiritual authority does not remove human vulnerability. Being respected does not mean being beyond examination, and being admired does not mean being perfect. In fact, one of the most dangerous things a community can do is assume that someone's position makes them immune to human weakness. That is where stories like this become powerful, not because of gossip, but because of what they reveal about us. Why are we so shocked when leaders turn out to be human? Why do we sometimes demand honesty while also punishing vulnerability? Why do so many leaders feel forced to hide their struggles until those struggles become impossible to conceal? And what does that say about the systems we create around power, faith, and public perception? If there is a lesson in all of this, it may be less about exposing a man and more about exposing a culture. A culture that often rewards image over transparency. A culture that sometimes places leaders on pedestals so high that falling becomes inevitable. A culture that expects spiritual perfection from flawed human beings. A culture that can confuse charisma with character, visibility with integrity, and influence with infallibility. Whether Bishop Herman Murray is at the center of a misunderstood rumor, an untold personal struggle, or a deeper story that has yet to fully emerge, the conversation itself forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. It reminds us that every public figure has a private reality. It reminds us that no one is above accountability. It reminds us that even the most admired leaders carry burdens the public may never fully see. And perhaps that is the most important point of all. Sometimes the secret isn't the detail people are hunting for. Sometimes the real revelation is the realization that our heroes were never meant to be superhuman in the first place. That does not excuse wrongdoing if wrongdoing exists. Accountability matters, truth matters, integrity matters. Especially in positions of spiritual leadership, those things matter deeply. But accountability should be rooted in evidence, not assumption. It should be grounded in facts, not viral speculation. It should seek truth, not just drama. That distinction is everything. Because in today's world, it has become increasingly difficult to separate investigation from entertainment. Audiences are drawn to mystery. Content thrives on suspense. Titles promise shocking secrets, hidden truths, and explosive revelations. But behind every headline is a real person, a real family, and a real community affected by the narrative being built. That is why the way we tell these stories matters. If you are looking at Bishop Herman Murray's life and legacy, the most meaningful approach is not to rush towards sensationalism. It is to ask better questions. What has made his leadership so influential? Why do people feel so strongly about him, both positively and critically? What parts of his public journey remain unclear? How do churches handle transparency when leaders are placed under intense scrutiny? And how can faith communities balance grace with accountability in moments like this? Those are the questions worth exploring. Because regardless of where this story ultimately leads, it is already revealing something significant. It is revealing how deeply people care about trust. It is revealing how fragile public confidence can be. It is revealing how quickly narratives form when there is silence, mystery, or unresolved tension. And it is revealing that even after years of influence and respect, a leader's story is never truly beyond re-examination. For supporters of Bishop Herman Murray, this moment may feel unsettling. For critics, it may feel validating. For neutral observers, it may simply feel fascinating. But for everyone involved, it should be a reminder that leadership is a sacred responsibility and that the higher the platform, the greater the need for truth, humility, and transparency. No matter what eventually comes to light, one thing remains undeniable: Bishop Herman Murray's story continues to provoke strong reactions because he has mattered to so many people. His voice has shaped lives. His leadership has left a mark. His presence has carried weight. And when someone with that kind of impact becomes the subject of lingering questions, the conversation naturally becomes bigger than one person. It becomes a reflection of faith itself. Not faith in the sense of doctrine, but faith in people, faith in institutions, faith in leaders, faith in the stories we are told, faith in the idea that the people guiding us are living in alignment with the values they preach. And when that faith is tested, the response can be emotional, intense, and deeply revealing. So, can we really uncover Bishop Herman Murray's biggest mystery after all these years? Maybe. Maybe the truth is still incomplete. Maybe the speculation has outrun the facts. Maybe there is more to the story than anyone publicly knows. Or maybe the real discovery is not about a hidden scandal at all, but about the fragile relationship between public image and private humanity. Either way, this conversation is not going away anytime soon. People will keep asking questions. People will keep searching for clarity. People will keep revisiting old moments and interpreting them through new lenses. And until there is clear, verified information, the mystery will continue to live in the space between admiration and uncertainty. That is what makes stories like this so powerful and so dangerous. They can reveal truth, or they can distort it. They can encourage accountability, or they can fuel speculation. They can lead to honest reflection, or they can become just another cycle of viral outrage. The choice depends on how we approach them. So if we are going to talk about Bishop Herman Murray, let's do it responsibly. Let's be honest about what we know. Let's be honest about what we don't know. Let's avoid turning rumors into facts. Let's resist the temptation to sensationalize what has not been proven. And let's remember that even the most visible leaders are still human beings navigating pressure, expectation, and imperfection. In the end, perhaps that is the true takeaway from all of this. Not that a powerful man may have hidden something, but that power itself often creates the conditions for silence. Not that a respected leader may have flaws, but that we are often uncomfortable admitting our leaders were always flawed. Not that faith should be abandoned when questions arise, but that faith should be mature enough to survive truth. And maybe that is the deeper revelation so many people are really wrestling with. Because when a leader's image begins to crack, what spills out is not just information, it is perspective. Perspective on how we idolize people. Perspective on how we handle disappointment. Perspective on how institutions protect themselves. Perspective on how difficult it is to hold both grace and accountability at the same time. Bishop Herman Murray's story, whatever the full truth may be, now sits at the intersection of all of those tensions. And that is why so many people are paying attention. If you've been following the conversations, you already know this topic is layered, emotional, and complex. It is not simply about a headline. It is about legacy, leadership, perception, and the often painful distance between who someone appears to be and who they really are when the spotlight fades. And that is exactly why this discussion matters. Because in the end, uncovering a mystery is never just about the mystery itself. It is about what the search reveals about all of us. If this topic surprised you, challenged you, or made you think differently about leadership and faith, share your thoughts below. What do you think is really at the center of the questions surrounding Bishop Herman Murray? Is this a case of public curiosity going too far, or do you believe deeper truths about leadership and accountability still need to come to light? Either way, this is the kind of conversation that continues long after the cameras stop rolling. If you want more thoughtful, investigative-style commentary like this focused on public figures, faith, leadership, and the stories beneath the surface, make sure to stay tuned for more. Thanks for the watching and subscribe.